When you find your sources that you believe you're going to use, one of the assignments for this particular essay is to have an annotated bibliography. Now, on this course, I have an example in the assignment sheet of exactly what it's supposed to look like and is what it's supposed to do. But let's talk just a little bit about an annotated bibliography. The real reason why we have an annotated bibliography is simply so that we can have a catalog for our research. Nothing's worse than reading an article, and in this case, reading 3 separate articles, and then you remember there's something, maybe there's a fact that you remember from one of the articles, but I can't remember which article that was. Well, that's one of the reasons why researchers make these annotated bibliographies. You're going to have an entry. So all your works cited entries have a hanging indentation. That's what I'm doing here. It's just kind of a visual representation of that. In addition to that, underneath you're going to have a paragraph. And in this paragraph, you're going to do 3 things. First of all, you're going to give me a really brief summary of what is said in the article. Now, you need to be broad enough that you're not going on and on and on and on, because really I only want maybe 2 or 3 sentences. But you're also going to need to be specific enough that whenever you read this particular summary, it jogs your memory and you know, oh yeah, that's where I can find that information. In addition to that, so you got your summary, right? In addition to your summary, you're going to write about why this is a credible source. Now, when we think about credible sources, we need to think about the world we live in right now. So, just a prime example is social media. There are and we all have family, we all have friends, and you know, I'll approach this in a way that I think most everyone can relate to. If someone posts a news article, let's suppose I were to post a news article from Fox News, okay? News article from Fox News up on my Facebook. There are some people in my friends and family group that no matter what the article said, even if the article said, you know, water is made out of water, right? They're going to be like, well, that's biased. I'm not going to believe you, right? The same can be said if I were to put something up there from MSNBC, and it says, you know, the sun is a thing. I mean, it can be objectively true, and a person will say, just because it's from that source, I don't believe you. So we need to take that into consideration. And another thing we need to take into consideration, in addition to the source, is it something that my audience may see as something that is biased? Is it something that is biased? So for instance, maybe you find out some very valuable information from a source that you know is somewhat biased. Maybe, maybe it's just kind of, well, it's obvious when I read this, I know there is a bias here. Now, does that make the information incorrect? Does that make it not true? No, not necessarily. It's very possible that you can report with a bias and still report factual information. Now, the way that the information is positioned and the way that the information is received, that might be different depending on the source. But you have to understand, it's okay to use some sources if they are somewhat biased. The problem is, will my audience take it and just say, well, that's irrelevant, I'm not going to listen? The other problem is, are you listening to biased information and saying, oh, wow, whatever they say is true? There are some scientific studies. There's a scientific study that came out that was maybe there was some kind of some kind of study, right? Just imagine there's a study that came out. Well, how people view that may differ, varying on the source. So is this a credible source? Is this a source that, are they making wild claims? Is this something that I could use? Even if it's biased, it's okay, because maybe you might say, well, this source said this, and this is why they're wrong. Or this source said this, and even though many people would assume this is a biased source, they're right because of this reason. Now, I want you to try to avoid biased sources, but I just want to give you that example. Because if for some reason, it's very difficult to find a source that no one will find to be biased. In addition to that, you'll need to think about, is this a current source? Take a look at, there's a sheet on our annotated bibliography folder, and it's the crap sheet. So is it current? Is it relevant? Is this accurate? Take a look at the descriptions. All I want in this second little portion is 1 or 2 sentences that gives me, and try to use the vocabulary on the crap sheet. And this is relevant because this is accurate. I can tell this is accurate because of this, and this. So try to use that crap sheet to give you a sentence or two as to why this source is a credible source for my paper. The third thing, so thing number 3, this is probably the easiest one. How do you plan to use it in your essay? Now, I say it's easy, but it may not be something that you have thought about yet, and that's why it's part of the assignment. So maybe you found a source that you disagree with. Well, again, it's okay to use sources that you disagree with, but how would I use a source that I disagree with? How would I do that? Well, you need something to argue with sometimes. Sometimes you'll need, and in the video that gives details on exactly what goes into your argumentative essay or your warning report, we're going to talk a little bit about a refutation. So maybe you need to find a source to give you the other side's point of view. And with that other side's point of view, you can say, well, this is, the other side says this. In fact, and maybe you quote them, maybe you summarize what they have to say, having that citation at the end. In fact, they say this. Well, and this is why they're wrong. I will tell you, what I would say to that is this. This is my response to that. So in that third portion, just a sentence or two, to say, this is how I plan to use it in my essay. Maybe you plan to use it to provide contextual information, just some basic information so the audience understands the subject better. Maybe you plan to use it in your argument as far as this is what we need to do about this issue. Maybe that's something that is going to boost your own argument, your actual thesis. Maybe it's something you'll use in your refutation. It's the other point of view. It gives my reader an idea of what the other side says, and then I will refute that. So just think about how you're going to use it in your essay and say, this is how I think I will use it in my essay. And that would be your third thing. So again, 2 or 3 sentences summarizing the source, 1 or 2 sentences here that will give me an idea of why it's a credible source for your essay, and 1 or 2 sentences here that will provide me information. How do I think it's going to be used? How will I plan to use it in my essay? If you don't follow this last one, if for some reason you use it in a different way at the end of the day, it's no big deal. But you should have an idea of why you're going to use, or how it is that you're going to use this source. All right, get to work.